My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I wanted nothing more than to belong to a family that cherished me, protected me, and made me feel like I mattered. I grew up believing that no matter what happened in the outside world, home would always be my safe place. But the truth I learned was darker, harsher, and far more painful than I ever imagined. My parents, Michael and Sarah, were not the kind of people who nurtured their child with love. They saw me as an inconvenience, a weight dragging them down, a constant reminder of responsibilities they never wanted. And one evening, at the family dinner table, they looked me in the eyes and said the words that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "You are a burden, Emily. We want to live without you." I remember sitting there, frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, my appetite instantly vanishing as those words hung heavy in the air. My younger brother, Ethan, smirked in satisfaction because he always loved seeing me put down. My parents looked almost relieved to have finally spoken aloud what they had probably thought for years. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached. My entire life seemed to collapse in that moment. But even in my devastation, something inside me stirred, something fierce, quiet, and determined. That night, I decided that if they didn't value me, I would find a way to value myself, and in doing so, I would make them regret ever underestimating me. The dinner table became a battlefield of silence as I excused myself and went to my room. Every cruel memory of my childhood replayed in my mind like an old movie. I remembered the birthdays they forgot, the times I begged for their approval only to be told I wasn't good enough, and the endless comparisons to Ethan, who could do no wrong in their eyes. He wasn't smarter, kinder, or more talented, but he was their golden child, the one they adored, while I was the one they tolerated. It became clear that their words at dinner were not a slip of the tongue, they were the truth of how they always felt. And that truth burned me alive. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but by morning, the tears had dried and been replaced with resolve. I knew I couldn't waste my life trying to win their affection anymore. If they wanted to live without me, I would give them exactly that, but not in the way they imagined. They thought casting me aside would free them, but it would be the start of their downfall. They thought I was a burden, but soon, they would learn I was the very backbone of their lives. I started by detaching myself slowly. I stopped doing their errands, stopped covering for Ethan when he got into trouble, and stopped helping around the house with things no one else wanted to do. For years, I had been the quiet fixer, the one who cleaned up everyone's mess, organized the bills, took care of small responsibilities, and kept the family from falling apart. The more I pulled back, the more they noticed. But they were too proud to admit it. In school, I focused on myself. I threw myself into my studies, knowing education was my escape route. I started working part-time jobs after classes, saving every dollar I could. I didn't tell my family how much money I was making because I knew they would try to take it from me. Instead, I opened a hidden account under my own name. I learned about investments, savings plans, and how to build something sustainable for myself. Every coin I saved was another step closer to independence. Meanwhile, Ethan kept slipping deeper into trouble. He started drinking at parties, skipping classes, and hanging out with people who were nothing but poison. My parents defended him every time, saying he was just finding himself, or going through a phase. I silently watched, knowing that eventually, their golden boy would reveal his true colors. 1 year later, things began to shift dramatically. I got a scholarship to a prestigious university. The letter arrived in the mail, and when I read it, my heart swelled with pride. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly achieved something on my own. When I showed my parents the letter, hoping, just hoping, for a shred of recognition, my mother barely glanced at it. "That's nice," she said flatly, before adding, "but who's going to help with the bills if you're off at school?" My father chimed in with, "Don't expect us to pay for anything. You're on your own." I nodded, smiled faintly, and said, "That's exactly what I wanted." They didn't understand what I meant, but soon they would. University life became the turning point. Away from the constant belittling and manipulation, I flourished. I studied hard, worked extra jobs, and even started a small online business selling designs and custom work. Slowly but surely, my independence grew. I made friends who valued me, professors who encouraged me, and I built a world where I wasn't just the unwanted daughter. I was Emily, strong, capable, and worthy. Back home, things began crumbling. Ethan had dropped out of college after one semester, and his drinking problem spiraled. He got into debt, started stealing from my parents, and even crashed their car after driving drunk. My parents, desperate to protect him, used up their savings bailing him out of trouble. They began borrowing money, mortgaging the house, and drowning in financial chaos. I heard about all of this through neighbors and distant relatives because my parents never called me, not even once. They were too proud, or perhaps too ashamed, to ask for my help. But destiny has a funny way of circling back. 4 years later, I had graduated with honors, built a successful business, and was living in a beautiful apartment of my own. I even received a job offer from a prestigious company, one that would give me financial security for life. That was when my parents showed up at my doorstep, uninvited. I'll never forget the look on their faces: desperation, exhaustion, and fear. They sat on my couch, shifting uncomfortably, while I served them tea like I would to strangers. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling. "Emily, we need your help. Your father lost his job, the debts are piling up, and Ethan is in jail again. We don't know what to do." I looked at them calmly, the same way they had looked at me at that dinner table years ago. I remembered their words: "You are a burden, Emily. We want to live without you." My chest tightened, but not from pain, this time, from the overwhelming power of realization. They had thrown me away like I was nothing, and now, I was the one person who could save them. I took a sip of my tea, set the cup down, and said quietly, "I thought you wanted to live without me. You made it very clear I was a burden." My father lowered his head in shame. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't mean it," she whispered. "We were wrong. We need you now." I let the silence stretch before answering. "I don't hate you. I've stopped expecting you to love me the way I once wanted. But I will not be your safety net. I built this life without you. You chose Ethan. You chose to cast me aside. Now, you live with that choice." They begged. They pleaded. But I stood firm. I offered them nothing but the truth they had given me years ago. And when they left my apartment that night, I felt a strange peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the unwanted daughter, I was the one in control. Over the next few years, my parents' lives continued to unravel. They lost their house, sold their belongings, and became dependent on the very community they once looked down upon. Ethan spiraled further, and though I heard he eventually ended up in prison for a long sentence, I never reached out. It wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Meanwhile, my own life blossomed. I expanded my business, traveled the world, and built friendships that felt more like family than blood ever had. I found love in people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw not the broken girl who once cried at the dinner table, but a woman who had risen from the ashes of her pain. In the end, my parents' cruel words became the fire that forged me. They said I was a burden, but I proved I was a blessing, to myself, to the world, and to the future I created. And though I never went back to them, I carried one lesson for the rest of my life. Sometimes, family is not the people who share your blood, but the people who share your vision, your respect, and your love. And so, I lived free, not from them, but from the chains of needing their acceptance. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.